we're going to have Ed Cleveland come up and announce our speaker for today.
Thanks, John. Good. You know, a few years ago, I was a ham radio operator for a long years and was part of the Aries Races emergency group. We had a couple small radios in the top of the jail downtown, and that's what we did. It wasn't very active. But you know, a couple of years ago, we had a hurricane come through here, well, actually just a year ago now, called Helene. Remember that bad boy? Well, she did a lot of damage up in North Carolina. And you know how people got information from one part of town to another? It wasn't telephone, wasn't TV, wasn't radio. It was ham radio operators sharing information. Some of us that go back to the days of Katrina remember those same situations. If you were in New Orleans after Katrina, you didn't get information from anybody else other than find somebody with a ham radio that could share information. Our speaker today is pretty well versed in the field of technology and information. As you can see, he's been around for a little while dealing with this, with a bachelor's and a master's in electrical engineering. And he is today the head of our Manatee County Emergency Support Group. And the information that he's going to share with you today, a lot of you will never have known even existed in Manatee County before today. Please welcome Steve Park.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I'm a bit of a geek, if you can't tell, and so if I start wandering around and waving my arms, just remember I was a baseball umpire for 32 years as well. So, but thanks, Ed, for that invitation and for the invitation here and for the lovely introduction. My name is Steve Park, and what I want to talk to you today isn't about my experience at the South Pole or throwing coaches out of baseball games, but a thing we call AUXCOM. AUXCOM is the Department of Homeland Security's term for auxiliary communications. And so if I start speaking in acronyms, then you know I'm an engineer. But how does AUXCOM relate to emergency management, specifically in Manatee County and all the jurisdictions in the state of Florida? So let me go back to that slide. I like that slide. My first experience was Katrina, and I was handling what we called business continuity planning for a small company called Raytheon during Katrina, when a big missile factory in Forest, Mississippi got hit. Okay, so that was my first enlightenment, and I think I got to stay over here. Am I doing okay? So how about that slide, right? You know, we're the lightning capital of North America here in Tampa Bay. So just a quick poll, if I may. How many first responders, retired first responders are in the audience today? Yeah. I know that table would have them. Good, thank you. How about military? Retired military? Thank you all for your service. God bless you. Anybody business continuity planning? Do you know what that means? Are you familiar with that? Because I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in terms of how Manatee County Emergency Management and the Department of Public Safety actually deals with that. Okay, now the tough question. Ever heard of the Incident Command System? MAC, all right. Yeah, good. Yeah, I didn't even look over there, yeah. So, let's see. So what is the Manatee County Emergency Support Group, or who are we? I'll go past that. Who are we? We are auxiliary communicators. What does that mean? We abide by the Incident Command System. We utilize licensed FCC operators. Notice I didn't say just hams, right? It's not just that ham radio guy thing. It's a little bit more than that. But that's where we start. That's where we recruit and train, is in the amateur radio service. And we also are a nonprofit corporation, and there's a good reason for that. When I first took over this role back in 2020, remember that was right in the middle of a little pandemic we were having, I realized that we needed something to provide governance and finance. An engineer always needs a finance guy. We always need a finance guy to stay out of jail. So we formed this nonprofit corporation to provide governance and financing or funding, and also insurance or indemnification. And so we're pretty typical, incorporated in the state of Florida with, a board of directors, and maybe something a little atypical. We take absolutely no money from any government organizations. We do our own fundraising. And my first boss, Chief Lischauer, I promised him that I would never ask him for a dime, except maybe at lunch. We have no inventory. Everything that we buy, sell, or not sell, but buy, produce, integrate, goes into the county inventory. So we literally own nothing except maybe a trailer. And we have no payroll. We are 100% volunteers. The group right now is about 55 volunteers trained and credentialed to work in Manatee County. So our mantra is we use our personal equipment in the comfort and safety of our own home to better serve the community. And if you think about hams, that's what they want to do anyway, right? They've got a lot of talent. They don't want to go out somewhere. They want to serve the community. And the best way to do that is in a diverse environment in the community, to be spread out. So if you haven't learned by now, our served agency is Manatee County Emergency Management, where we provide volunteer radio operators during local emergencies, declared or undeclared. So that's kind of a 365, 24/7 kind of a role, because an emergency could be something localized. It could be something where we're in blue skies and we have no idea that anything's going on. So we kind of serve that role for the community, and then also, of course, the big hitters, right? Everybody knows. But in 2020, in the middle of that pandemic, I inherited the reins of this group that we call AKA Aries Racies. And Aries is the ham radio term. It stands for the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. Racies is actually a fallback to the old civil defense days. It's still in the FCC rules and regulations. It's the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. So anybody with a license is authorized under the guidance of a government entity like Manatee County Emergency Management to operate radio equipment in all the different radio services. So we take advantage of that. And Chief, thank you very much for your encouragement, your counsel, and also your mentorship. It's been a pleasure. With that, I thought I'd maybe share some pictures with you. So this is the Emergency Operations Center in the Public Safety Center right down the road. And this is where about 100 leaders within the community gather, co-located, and become best of friends whenever there's a lockdown for things like, a hurricane warning. And so we get to know all the agencies and partners, and this other term that I learned not too long ago called a VOAD. Anybody know what a VOAD is? Those are volunteer organizations assisting in disasters. Think the Red Cross, the Salvation Army. There's a whole list of those as well. So when you think of disasters, what comes to mind for you? Anybody? Shelters. Okay. What kind of disasters? Hurricanes, right? Everybody's thinking hurricanes. Yeah. Power outage. Thank you. Floods. Yeah, we've had a lot of those lately. I almost built an ark yesterday. So here's some examples of emergency experiences that we've had just since 2016 in Manatee County. Every one of these. Fortunately, no mass shootings, although we planned for that. For example, you'll see things like wildfires, red tide, hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding. One of my favorites, hazmat spills. We had a railroad train derailment not too long ago. Remember a little thing called Piney Point? Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. So there's an environmental impact. So let me poll the audience again real briefly, if I may. How many of you have a family emergency plan? Great, great, great. That's number one requirement to be a member of our organization, by the way. Because if you can't take care of your family and yourself, then you can't volunteer and help the community. You become part of the problem. How many of you have worked in business continuity? I know I asked this before, but planning is very important in business continuity. And the diversity of the things, the talents that you need in order to deal with that become extreme. Local and county emergency management. I know this table's got that hands down. How about at the federal level? Anybody ever done any state or federal kinds of things? Good. FEMA perhaps? No? Oh, military. Good. So in your plans, what are your top priorities for long-term recovery? Because that's really the thing. We can always weather the storm. We can always hunker down and fight through. But then you got to recover. And you have to try and restore your family, your safety, your business, the economy of the state, of which the governor's pretty interested in a lot of the things going on in Manatee County, if you haven't noticed. So I wanted to introduce you to really a kind of our structured way of thinking about those things. We take the threats, hazards, and the impacts of those and do a risk assessment. It's called a THERA. It's a structured approach to risk management. And in Manatee County, there are dozens of draft incident action plans, dozens, for all kinds of things that could potentially happen, so that we're prepared and can drill and practice. The priorities really are, number one, can people get fed? Do they have water? And three, do they have power? So those are really the top three. And people don't think about communications so much. But communications to me is number four, and the reason it's important is because if we want to facilitate widespread or wide area recovery after a disaster, we have to be able to prioritize. So now what the military would call situational awareness or common operating picture becomes very much an important part of the operations in the EOC as well. We need to know. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but what that does is that prioritizes capabilities that we have to either mitigate or overcome risks and hazards. So enough of that kind of talk. Here's a list of, this isn't the most recent THERA, but it's a couple years old, but I've highlighted the things that particularly require auxiliary communications, or AUXCOM. And those are things that, if you've got cell phones and internet, you probably don't need us, right? But once the power goes out, most people don't have cell phones or internet. So a power outage is pretty important. Things like hurricanes and floods and tornadoes all result in this critical infrastructure disruption and power failures. And then there's a few other things that we've been fortunate enough not to really, at least in my history, experience, but that are certainly risks. And we just simply call those civil unrest and terrorist kinds of concerns as well. And so what I wanted to do was just give you a little introduction into the capabilities that we, as the Manatee County Emergency Support Group, aka ARES RACES, you'll hear me say that a lot, what we provide to the community. And this was back in 2020 when I first sat down with Chief Lischauer. I said, what kind of things do you think are important? And he goes, oh, glad you asked. Number one, don't ever, no, number one was we need auxiliary labor. We need, and I use that in kind of a tertiary form, we don't have enough paid employees to go 24/7 for a long-term recovery. We need auxiliary labor. And you've seen that in a number of the groups like ours in other realms. So in my realm, it means we need people that can handle a radio, that we can put a butt in a seat at midnight, right, or whatever, maybe a 911 call center, whatever it might be. My line to all my folks is, we're all one team. If they ask you to sweep the floor, pick up a broom, right? But it's all about having trained, credentialed auxiliary labor that can go in a long-term recovery. Number two was don't ever, 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 ever lose contact with Tallahassee. And I said, yes, sir, we got that covered. We can do that. Actually, that is to provide a liaison with the state emergency response team in Tallahassee and all the other Florida jurisdictions, the other 66 other counties that are in the state of Florida. And then I said, sir, we'll go one further. I'll throw Washington, D.C. in for what that's worth. So we also cover a lot of federal activities as well. And there's a lot of federal partners, not just Washington, D.C., but Department of Homeland Security, of which we operate under, Department of Defense, Department of Health, the list goes on and on, all of which become critical. And so what we've trained to do under the incident command system is to handle all the standard paperwork that exists within all those communications paths. And thank God they're common, right? Ever since Katrina, that we've standardized on all those things. We call them ICS forms, and my group becomes the post office. We literally don't create messages. We literally deliver them from one place to the other, and a place is a kind of a virtual figurative thing. It could be simply between a community emergency response team, a local community in the county, and the Department of Health, or all those permutations. But that's what we do. We are tertiary capabilities for emergency management. So we don't do public safety comms. There's a lot of myths that say, oh, well, you're a ham radio operator and we need you to be in the shelters. Oh no, evacuation shelters are our last resort, right? We don't have to be there. It's not really a need. Police and fire, public safety, law enforcement, fire and rescue, that's an incredibly robust communication system, and absolutely no need for any auxiliary services there. But there's a lot of other folks that do need our help. So our partners rely heavily. Our partners that rely heavily on internet and cell phones tend to be some public, but mostly private entities like SRQ Airport, Manatee County, or Manatee Port Authority. Okay, there's another pretty important one. The State Agricultural Response Team we're very, very active with the agricultural community in a lot of the more rural areas. And so what do? We do provide service. Oh, what did I hit? Sorry, Mac. We do provide service to the evacuation shelters on a liaison, as a liaison for what another term that we use quite often is unmet needs. What unmet needs do you have? Well, we need a pallet of water. We need extra cots. We need meals or something. We provide outbound safe and well reporting for the American Red Cross. I don't think they call it safe and well anymore, but the idea is here's the names of all the people with their outside contacts that are in this shelter. We give that to the Red Cross, and they post that on a website so that all the world can check on their loved ones. We provide on-site operators at the special needs shelters. That's a whole nother case, and so we're privileged to be a part of that as well. We also develop and maintain all the communications for our community emergency response teams, and in Manatee County we have a coalition of at least 22 that I know of now. There may be more, there's more in the making, but 22 different independent community emergency response teams. Is anybody familiar with CERTs? No? Yeah, a few? Okay, good. And so they have a whole nother set of criteria, and of course, they may or may not have an indigenous ham radio operator, but they have the need 24/7 for emergency and priority messaging. If their cell phones are down, or we actually had an incident where the 911 call center went down a few years ago, and there's an emergency, who are they going to call? They're going to call Auxcom. If they do activate, and they're the only entity under the incident command system that can self-activate, nobody can do that, I can't do that, but they can self-activate, so they need to identify and notify us immediately. So we handle those activations from the CERTs. We handle what we call situation reports. Situation reports have become very standard now. There's certain information that we need to know. There's certain information that they need to know. So it's kind of a two-way street, but we do situation reports back and forth, at least on a daily basis, if not twice a day or whatever the shift change might be. And most importantly, we can't open this kind of activity up to the community, to the public without some training and credentialing. So we also provide training, credentials, and corroborate the information that they're providing to us as situational awareness. So, any questions at this point?
Hello.
Yes, please.
Sir, I have spent 10 years, many years ago, on the school board, and at that time, the American Red Cross actually did have teams that staffed our shelters. In recent years with the hurricanes we've had, because my wife is a school district administrator, I've actually lived in a shelter on 3 different occasions in the last 8 years.
Sure.
And we wound up having to kind of roll up our sleeves and all kind of pitched in. But, and I know you said it's for a different discussion, but I would share with you that a lot of things have changed. There's a lot of new faces due to retirements, turnover, or whatever. And I will tell you that they kind of had to learn by the seat of their pants.
Sure,
I would
yeah.
highly encourage that there be some training for shelter operations, and that there is a need for communication. I will tell you that not this recent time last year, but a couple of years ago when we were in a shelter, because of the drop in pressure, we had a lady go into labor.
Yeah,
And so the need for communications to the outside, at the very least, to get somebody that knew something medically, that if we had to deliver there, someone over the phone. So I would just highly encourage you to not necessarily, you said it's kind of a thing of last priority. I will also share with you that after Milton going directly overhead, the number of people that I heard that are from the west side of the county who said, I never really took those evacuation orders but
Yeah,
now I
yeah.
will, and I will never not do it again. I think the next time we have a hurricane, you're gonna find our shelters, at least on the west side of the county, inundated. I was at Lee Middle School one year, we had over 1,000 people in there, and when power goes out, and contrary to popular belief, only a couple of the schools, the special needs, because they have to operate medical equipment, only a couple of the schools have any form of generator.
Yeah, no,
Some of those FEMA dollars to at least put a small generator to operate some essential items.
Certainly.
That would be great, because I will tell you this one thing. Having 1,000 people with no power getting up in the morning as the hurricane's coming over and not having the ability to brew coffee. You all laugh, but I am telling you, there were some tempers and some people that we had to keep them calm.
you're striking a lot of nerves, sir. You really are.
These are all key and important, and I would just love to speak with you afterwards about how we can do some training, because contrary to what people thought, basically the people at the school district, they were ordered.
Right.
Don't worry about your own family and your own plans. You need to go to work at
Right.
the shelter.
Right.
And a lot of them didn't have training.
Yeah, let me clarify my statement. I'm sorry it was pretty misleading, right? My statement was intended to reflect the people that I'm responsible for and that I'm training because of the threats and hazards that are posed. Now, the first thing I noticed is you have to understand that there's a difference between an evacuation shelter, which is a school, right, which is a state entity, and then there's the Red Cross long-term evacuation shelters for people who don't have homes to go back to. So those two things are quite different. In a long-term recovery, we will have operators in those Red Cross shelters, absolutely. In the schools, our recovery mode is to get those schools open again as soon as possible, right? And the communications to those school principals who are the shelter managers in Manatee County is extremely robust. So I don't have a high risk assessment of the comms for that. That was my only point, except for the special needs shelters, as you pointed out. You also mentioned some other things that I'd love to talk to you about, but I think training of those folks, and we provide liaison service. So when I say liaison service, I have to push back quite heavily against the, I'm a ham radio operator, I've got my hand held in my pillow, where's my special room in the shelter, right? That doesn't exist. So if I seem a little edgy, that's why. But the counter to that is we have people that are located all around the county, and they have assignments to, I'm like it by Williams Elementary, right? So it's easy for me to ride my bike, walk over or whatever, and have a conversation, and then manage that situation if, in fact, the radios go down. But those radios are public safety radios, same as law enforcement, fire and rescue. So not a big risk there. But I would like to talk to you a little bit more as we go on. A lot of what we do, besides from the comfort and safety of our own homes, focuses now around the Emergency Operations Center. And again, a wonderful, masterfully crafted benefit that I have is that we are not in ESF2. If you're familiar with emergency support functions, ESF2 is logistics, which is where all communications falls. Our group in Manatee County is actually part of ESF5, which is the planning team. And in fact, I didn't fix the slide, I'm sorry. This is a picture of our little corner, 2 desks, 2.3 full-time equivalent heads and a 24/7 full-time recovery. But we have 2 desks, each with 4 radios, computers, phones, all of that kinds of stuff. And we're actually in a corner of the planning room. In fact, the planning chief sits just to my left in there. And it becomes very important because things happen like, remember the flood of Dakin Dairy? 2 years ago, right? The breach of the Myakka River, the levee in Myakka City, was witnessed by an officer on horseback. And he called me in the EOC, and I turned to the planning chief and I said, Shannon, have you ever heard of this road? And she said, yeah, my mother lives on that road. Will you give me that microphone and let me talk to the man? So that kind of stuff is pretty routine as far as situational awareness and for what we do in the planning room. Plus, there are just a lot of really cool people to hang around with. Our antennas are all survivable. So here's a picture of our antennas. They all lay down behind that wall. If you've not been to the Public Safety Center and you wonder why the windows are so small, it's because the whole building is survivable. But as soon as we get first light or the winds go down and they unlock the doors, we crank those up and we're on our way. So I went through the first set of criteria that Chief Lischauer gave me back in 2020, but wait, something else came up. And he said, Steve, at some point, we have some things that might happen where we might lose the 911 call center. He said, can you establish something at the corner of walk and don't walk for 2 seats for a couple of dispatchers? And I said, yeah, sir, I think we can do that. So we're still working on that. There's a work in process to have a remote point-to-point data link that can go anywhere. Again, think Piney Point. Right? We didn't have to link to the EOC, but we had to handle what I call flight following information for a lot of people coming in and out, especially because they evacuated a lot of agriculture. A lot of horses and a lot of cattle got relocated. Fortunately, not a lot of people out in that area, but we became really good friends with the state ag recovery team at that point. So on-scene recovery sites are what the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency under Auxcom would call an incident communications center. You know, our incident command sites can be remotely located. The communication sites may not be co-located, but they also need to be remote. So that's another service that we provide or attempt to provide. We certainly train and have equipment to make that happen. And then finally, I wanted to impress upon you the fact that we're also blessed or privileged to have access to the public safety radio sites. So where the P25 800 megahertz systems all exist, and there's at least a dozen of those sites around the county, we also have access to those sites. And they're really nice things like 200-foot towers, diesel generators for emergency power, air conditioning, and really, really, really fine equipment. So we're blessed to have all of that, and to be trusted users of that equipment. I won't bother you with the credentialing, but we have 3 levels of credentialing, all the way up to and including the FEMA Professional Development Series, if you want to have a leadership position. And then there's also a number of CISA Auxcom classes. And so we credential people. You'll hear across the entire paid community, you can't work here unless you have IS 100 700. And that same thing applies to our CERT leads who are credentialed, and any of my folks that will ever handle any kind of priority or for official use only kind of information will have that, at least that minimum credential. To work in the Public Safety Center, you need to be at level 2, which is a whole nother level of FEMA classes, if you will. So we're really privileged to have such great sponsors, and at this point, I'd love to take as many questions as you've got time for. And if you want to know more about Auxcom, we have a website. Everybody has a website, right? I even have a QR code now. I didn't even know what that was 2 years ago, but we got one. So any questions about auxiliary comms or maybe emergency management? Yes?
I've been seeing this commercial that like kind of threw me for a loop. I think it's for preppers, but I'm just curious. Are you guys prepped for something as crazy as an EMP? Do you
Oh,
have
absolutely.
Faraday
Yeah,
cages?
yeah.
I was just curious, that's electromagnetic
So,
pulse.
electromagnetic pulse,
Like
which
when
is-
you drop the enema or something.
It doesn't even take that.
Yeah, there are different things.
Just dirty bombs will do that. Yeah. No. So, yeah, we are.
Yeah, I just wondered.
If you want to know more about it, I have to take you in a private room and maybe shoot you after I tell you. But in my former life, I dealt a lot with electromagnetic pulse and total dose and all kinds of zoomy stuff as well.
God forbid we ever have one, but.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I get to play with the old vintage stuff. You know, the new transistor radios and all that. They're pretty susceptible to EMP. But remember those things called vacuum tubes? They operate right through. They're just fine. Yeah, that is cool. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Well, again, thank you for the opportunity.
Right there, Steve. It is a Bradenton Kiwanis tradition to present you with a golden ruler to measure your future success.
I am
over here.
honored.
Take a picture for Lemoyne here.
One more. All right, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Another thank you for Steve. All right, just to recap, if you still need to sign up for the Bishop, please see Mac. If you can help out with the theater this weekend, please see Ann or let me know and I'll let Ann know. And if you'd like to help out with the SLPs, please let me know. Please join us next week. Our speaker will be Tom Shabby, who is a retired Navy SEAL and motivational speaker. Should be another great program. Have a great week.